Welcome to Generous Impact. I'm your host, Amanda Brummett, joined today by my co-host and daughter, Madison O'Neill, who introduced me to an incredible organization making a real difference, Team Luke Hope for Minds. Our guest today is Tim Siegel, co-founder of the organization, here to share the powerful ways Team Luke Hope for Minds supports children with brain injuries and their families. From providing essential services to creating a community of hope, their work is nothing short of inspiring.
Is there anything better than a mother-daughter doing a podcast together?
No, nothing better.
I can't imagine.
We don't do, this is only our second episode to do together.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm honored. I'm honored to have both of you.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate your time. I would love it if you could just start by telling us about your background. Who are you personally and professionally before Team Luke Hope for Minds?
Well, thank you for having me today. I would love to do that. I grew up in New Orleans, and then I played tennis my whole childhood, and then went to the University of Arkansas where I played tennis. And then after I graduated from Arkansas in 1986, I traveled the world playing pro tennis for 3 years, and then became the SMU women's tennis coach for 2 years in 1991-92. And then in January of 1993, I began my 23-year career as the men's tennis coach at Texas Tech. So tennis has been my life, sports is my life, and being a father then became my life.
Wow.
I grew up playing tennis in New Orleans and loved being there. I am a diehard New Orleans Saints fan, and really knew that I wanted to play professional tennis my whole childhood and then into college, and then was blessed to have been able to play in all the Grand Slam events, Wimbledon, US Open, and all those tournaments, and really loved playing pro tennis. I learned a lot, traveling the world, and then I also knew I wanted to be a college tennis coach. That was something that I always felt was in my blood, and loved every bit of it. But what I loved more than just coaching college tennis was being a father. When I started in 1993, I had a daughter from a previous marriage, and then was remarried in 2001, and then had three children, kind of all pretty close together. My oldest, or I now have a daughter who's 22, one who's 20, and then Luke, my son, would be 19.
I'm curious, how did you go from being a dad caring for his son through a brain injury to starting Team Luke Hope for Minds?
Well, and I guess we could back up just a tad, and I can answer that question. I loved coaching in college. I really did. But what I loved more was being around my family. And at the time, I had a 12-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. And I just didn't want to miss any more of their sporting events, whether it was basketball, volleyball, or Luke played baseball. And so I made the decision on July 8th of 2015 to resign from Texas Tech. And I became the middle school and high school coach just so that I could be around my children. And 20 days later is when my son, Luke, was in a golf cart accident.
Wow.
And I didn't know the severity of it until I got to the hospital. And what I did find out that the golf cart landed on top of Luke's chest, and he suffered head and chest trauma and was in cardiac arrest for 7 minutes. And the first few days were touch and go. We spent 44 days in Lubbock, and then 4 months at Cook Children's Hospital, where we were told that Luke would never use his limbs, use his voice, or open his eyes. He eventually did all three, and I became Luke's primary caregiver. I took care of Luke. We did therapies together. We drove to Fort Worth every week for 2 years to do therapy. I was with Luke 24 hours a day, while also trying to be the best father to my 3 daughters, and being a grandfather to my grandchildren, and then to be a good husband to my wife. But it wasn't until, I guess it was the middle of 2017, when I started Team Luke as a foundation. And,
wow.
And then in January of 2018, I merged with another nonprofit called Hope for Minds. And then we became Team Luke Hope for Minds starting in January of 2018. And so that's kind of how it all started for us. And for me, I knew that when my son had his injury, that I was no longer going to coach tennis, at least not on a collegiate level. But I also knew that I had a bigger, more important purpose in life. And that was to start this nonprofit and to help families every day. And son made tremendous progress. Despite what we were told, he used his voice. I saw his eyes all the time. I would ask Luke to move your tongue and he would move his tongue, whether it was to listen to music or move your tongue if you love the saints, and he would move his tongue. He made the most progress in year 6, but year 6 was also the year
Wow.
that Luke got COVID in August of 2021 at the age of 15. And I remember taking Luke to the hospital, and they put Luke in a room, not an ICU. I went home to get some rest. I got a knock on my door at 4 a.m, get to ICU. On my way to the hospital, I heard a voice, "You're going to be okay, but Luke's not going to make it."
Oh, that's
On,
heartbreaking.
on the way to the hospital, I fought that. And then the first person I spoke to was the doctor, and she said, "I don't know if your son's going to make it." And I said, "I know." And then Luke passed away on August 19th of 2021. I always knew that Luke was going to speak. He was so close to speaking. I would say, "Luke, let me hear your voice." Or I would say, "I love you." And he would respond with, just kind of, he was so close. But I guess we can say today that he is speaking. He's just now speaking through me. And our nonprofit has grown tremendously over the last 7+ years.
I'm curious, what do you think gave you that fortitude and discernment in the midst of such a tragedy that you were able to say, let me take this and do something beautiful for the world?
As a tennis player, as a tennis coach, I always believed in discipline, hard work, never giving up, fighting. And so I think that was part of it. But I also realized that, you know, I felt in my heart, and still do to this day, that God is using me in a way that I never could have imagined.
Mm.
Luke was touch and go that first day. Was he going to survive? And I've been asked how different life would have been had Luke passed day one instead of 6 years in. And I think the biggest thing is that we would not have a nonprofit that supports children after brain injury. I just know that what I learned also is that so many families are experiencing what I experienced.
Mhm.
There's a brain injury every 9 seconds. That we had over 70 families reach out to us in 2 years. So, it is so powerful to be able to help others. And I think when I started to feel that and learn about other families, that I did have a kind of a higher purpose, a more of a calling. So I guess really to answer your question, I kind of grew into this, but I also know that I'm doing. I always tell people that I have a nonprofit to help others because of Luke and for Luke.
Yeah.
And so I do know that whatever I'm doing the rest of my life, there'll be an involvement with tennis because I'm back playing tennis again for the first time in 9 years.
How wonderful.
Luke and I played tennis, the last thing that Luke and I ever did.
Mm.
And it took me 9 years to get past that feeling.
Mm.
And now I'm back playing tennis. So I just feel like I am in a better place. And I think for that reason, I know that my job really is to help others. And because so many people need our help.
Yeah. So give me the details on that. I know you provide financial support, education. Tell us what that looks like for a family that has a child with a brain injury.
We get applications. teamlukehopeforminds.org is our website. And so people will go on to our website and they'll either, just reach out, fill out applications to try to get our financial support. But I think our financial support that we give to families is certainly important because so many of the therapies are not covered by insurance. But I feel like our education is equally, if not more so, important. When a family has a child with a brain injury, you feel isolated, yes, but you also don't have answers. You have so many questions and so few answers. And so they want to talk to someone who's been there. And that's when I come in. And I tend to talk to parents quite a bit, giving them hope, certainly, but also just sharing what we did as a family and what we did for Luke. And so I I think that's really important, explaining that, but also support groups online. We have sibling support group. We have a marriage counseling support group. We have a dad support group that I run. We have speakers come in to talk to families. We have our conference, which is the most important thing that we do. There are other nonprofits in America that do what we do at a much smaller scale, but nobody has a conference. And so we bring in speakers, and it's just such a beautiful time because it's the one time that families feel safe. It's another time where families realize that everybody gets it. And so I'm just so blessed to be part of an amazing staff that every day we are diligently working to raise money to help families because we don't want to tell families we can't help them, but also to provide education, financial support, and just being someone that gets it and understands because I've certainly been there.
That's incredible.
I'm curious, do you often see that once people kind of talk with you and work through everything, that they later want to get involved as well to be able to further that mission?
I think that certainly we've had some of the families, absolutely. We actually helped a family in Indiana. We helped provide financial support for them to get to do some therapy. And it's called Light for Levi is the name of their foundation. And they started it after getting to know us. And there are others for sure as well. Because you do hear that when something tragic happens, you really kind of have two choices. One is to die a slow death yourself or to pick up and see what you can do to help others, whether it's just from accidents or alcohol, drugs, whatever happens in someone's life that they want to be able to give back. And it is a challenge sometimes because what I experienced is I had 6 years of trying to take care of Luke and be the best father I could be for him and provide for him because I was so confident that Luke was going to get better. And he did make his most progress in year six, which is rare for what doctors tell you. But I'll tell you one thing that happened to me. I was asked to speak at my daughter's middle school shortly after, I guess it was about a year after Luke's accident. And I came up with which is now called Inspirations of Luke. It's number one, find your passion. I lost mine, but I've regained it through Team Luke. Number two is don't ever quit. And obviously that speaks for itself. Number three is to lean on friends and family. Four is to make good choices, be careful. Five is to have faith. Six is to find forgiveness. And seven is to let a loved one's legacy live on through you. Number six was probably one that I needed the most. I finally forgave after 8 years, and that freed me. I felt, I live with something that I wouldn't want any parent to live with, and that's just sadness every day. I have triggers every single day. I moved from Lubbock, where I lived for 30 years, to Dallas a little over a year ago. The triggers are still here in Dallas. The triggers are when I breathe, when I put my head on the pillow. But I do know that finally forgiving allowed me to kind of take a step forward and to heal. But I do know that I'm helping a lot of families, and that's the most important thing. And Luke will always be in my heart.
That's really powerful, Tim. Your impact since 2011 has been extremely impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I never realized the impact that I'm making or that our organization is making. 2011 is when Hope for Minds began. In 2018 is when we merged to form Team Luke Hope for Minds. I've been told a lot that you have no idea the impact that you're making. And I have a Facebook page called Luke's Legacy, Pray for Luke Siegel. And we have over 70,000 followers. And when I write something and it reaches 100,000 people and people will text me and tell me, don't stop writing. And I've written a couple of books that I think has made an impact on families. And so I don't think it's possible for me to I guess, understand the impact that I'm making. But what I do know is that Luke and I together every day are making an impact. Luke was a very, very special young man. He was such a sweet little boy, had tremendous empathy. He had a way of making all of his friends feel like they were his best friend. He was so sweet and caring, but also was a tremendous little athlete. And he really was the perfect little boy. And so I feel like together, the two of us are continue to try to make an impact. And Luke also had others in his life that impacted him, and they are still impacted. I mentioned the New Orleans Saints because Drew Brees was Luke's hero. And Drew Brees came to our house, did an event for Team Luke. Drew Brees continues to keep in touch. When we go to Saints games, we talk to Drew quite a bit when we're there with my daughters. And And it was just special what Drew means to us. Patrick Mahomes wears the Team Luke bracelet on his right wrist. He has stated over and over that he started his nonprofit called 50 and the Mahomies because of Luke Siegel. And so that's special. The tennis world continues to be impacted by my son, Andre Agassi, Andy Roddick, and I can just go on and on. And so I do know that we're making an impact, but I don't know that it's possible for me to realize how widespread that is.
Yeah, that's incredible. Do you have a guesstimate on the number of families you've served or the dollar amount that you've given for people's assistance?
Well, in the past, we have reached close to $500,000 to families, pretty much
Wow,
most
that's
years each
huge.
year. And the amount of families, it's hard to quantify because we help families, A, through financial support, others just through our support groups. And then we have over 200 families coming to our conference. Some overlap, but a lot of it is brand new. And so it is, we're trying to raise, Team Lico for Minds needs to raise about $1.5 million a year just to be able to serve all the families. I I just never in my wildest dreams would have realized how prevalent brain injuries are among children. We see non-fatal drownings the most, car accidents, accidents like my son, ATV golf cart accidents, accidents at home. And it is heartbreaking, of course, to hear these stories, but also heartwarming. I have a podcast, and just earlier this week, I interviewed a couple, a husband and wife, whose son had a brain injury at birth, just after birth, and just to be able to talk to the parents and know what they're going through, and understanding how important it is as couples to stay in communication, and because my situation was I didn't want to upset my wife, I didn't want her to upset, she didn't want to upset me, and yet we needed to do a better job of communicating because it's such a tough thing to deal with. And I believe the number is close to 90% of families end in divorce when you've lost a child. And unfortunately, I am one of those 90% because we had an amazing marriage until things that happened to my son. And it's hard because Luke's injury was one thing, but his subsequent passing, it's been 4 years since Luke passed, but basically it feels like 4 months. But I do know that I will never stop trying to help families. I will always try to share Luke's story. And one of the things that has happened is, Luke's favorite number is 3. And everyone I talk to that knows our story knows that. And when I get pictures of someone sharing that number 3, I know they're remembering about my son. The football coach at Texas Tech, Joey McGuire, does not give out number 3 anymore. It goes to the hardest worker and the greatest fighter in honor of my son, which is a tremendous honor. And so Lubbock, Texas knows our story very well, but I think also the country does as well.
Yeah, it's unimaginable, what you went through, but I'm humbled and blown away by the good work that you guys have done and that you continue to do. So you told us about your conference. What else? What's next for Team Luke Hope for Minds?
I've always been asked, what do we want to see in 5 years or 10 years?
Yeah.
What I want to be able to see is that we will always have money to help families. We Team Luke survives on raising money. We have events coming up. We have a big event at the Star in Dallas with Darren Woodson, former 3-time Super Bowl champion. We've had Andy Roddick, we've had Andre Agassi, we've had some very well-known Eli Young Band and Diamond Rio music artists have come to Lubbock to do events. We have golf tournaments. So we have to raise money. And so that's what I would love in a crystal ball perfect world is that we have so many donations and major gifts that we don't ever have to worry about where's our next dollar coming from. That's number one. Number two is simply to be able to be so well known that everyone that has a brain injury knows they can come to Team Luke Hope for Minds. And that's how I see things. And I know that will happen. I have this faith not only in God to help me, but also that we're going to be able to raise enough money to be able to help everyone. Because currently we have a fairly significant waiting list just to come to our conference. And we will always have a waiting list to be able to allow us to give them money for their children. And we help, and financially what we do is sometimes we're helping, whether it's therapy, sometimes paying bills, sometimes it's a lift for their car or a renovation of a bathroom. There's so many different ways that we can help families. And because what ends up happening a lot is whether it's mom or dad that loses a job because you have to take care of your child. That's what happened with me in a lot of ways. And I was blessed and fortunate enough that I could continue to be his caregiver while also working with Team Luke. So that's kind of, for me, how I would love to see things.
Your organization is so inspiring to us. Who or what organizations inspire you, Tim?
Well, I mentioned Patrick Mahomes a little while ago, and Patrick was, my son Luke was a huge, huge football fan, and of course, growing up in New Orleans, I was either a good parent or a bad parent that that Luke had no choice but to be a Saints fan.
It sounds
But
like you were
also,
successful in that.
I think I was, but also Texas Tech. We used to watch Patrick Mahomes in practice, and when the accident happened, I stayed away from Texas Tech for almost a year because of how hard it was for me to be on campus. And one day, former coach Cliff Kingsbury asked me to come with Luke to practice. And I met with Patrick Mahomes and spent some time with him, and then met with him at another time. And he told me, I will never play another football game for the Chiefs without wearing the Team Luke bracelet on my right wrist. And last year in the playoffs, Patrick basically said that he started his nonprofit because of my son. And so I know his foundation called 15 and the Mahomies. He started because of Luke, and he helps children all over, especially in the Kansas City area. And so certainly he is one because of what he means to me, what he meant to Luke, and I think also what Luke continues to mean to him. And so certainly, but anytime I see a foundation, Andy Roddick has a foundation, Andre Agassi has a foundation, those people that meant a lot to me and still do, that have foundations or nonprofits to support children, really goes a long way for me.
Yeah, those are all beautiful and very inspiring. Well, Tim, if people have heard your story today and they want to somehow get involved or give back, what can they do for Team Luke Hope for Minds?
Well, I guess there's two things. One is to go on our website, teamlukehopeforminds.org. Also, we have a documentary that's on YouTube. It's called Hope Beyond the Diagnosis. It came out in March, and it's very special. We interviewed families. Dr. Phil has a segment on there. A lot of the famous athletes I mentioned are on there as well. That really shows you what we're all about. And I think that's, a big thing for us. But also, if you go on your social media, everybody has social media, I'm sure, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, we are on those, Twitter, TikTok, all those things that we are part of, and just share what you've heard about Team Luke, because you never know. You might know someone who knows someone whose child had a brain injury. And we can help families. Sometimes the help that a family needs is just to be able to talk to someone. I was asked early on, do I want to continue with Luke? And I said, what do you mean continue? That's how grim the diagnosis was. But that's what we hear a lot of families say. And so I'm here to say that the brain can heal. Every brain injury is different, yes. The improvement of a child is also different. But I was always very confident that Luke was going to do more than what we were told. We did PT, OT speech. We did hyperbaric oxygen. We did stem cell, laser therapy, acupuncture, all those things we did. But I believe that the number one therapy that Luke received was love that he received from me, from his family, and from his friends. And so I always spoke to Luke as if he understood. And, I would ask Luke, move your tongue if you want to listen to Dad's favorite music, Bruce Springsteen. He wouldn't move his tongue. Move your tongue if you want to listen to Ed Sheeran, his favorite. He would move his tongue. Luke, are the Saints going to win today? He would move his tongue. So Luke was in there, and I brought that out of him. And that's why in some ways it is also so hard for me to swallow, knowing that Luke is not here, because I just knew that Luke was going to change the world. He was going to speak. But as I said earlier, he is speaking, and he is changing the world. And he's changing the world because I will always make sure that people will know about my son and about our organization.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time, for your passion, and for taking something so difficult and turning it into something beautiful that you're doing for families and for their children.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today on Generous Impact. It's been such an honor to hear from Tim Siegel, co-founder of Team Luke Hope for Minds. If today's conversation inspired you, we encourage you to learn more, get involved, or support their mission. You can find them online at teamlukehopeforminds.org. You You can also listen to Tim's podcast, Tuesdays with Tim, or watch their documentary on YouTube. We'll be back soon with more stories of people and organizations creating meaningful impact. Until then, thanks for listening.